Direct sales has been all the buzz as of late. A lot of platforms are starting to embrace that philosophy, including places like Book Vault or Ingram Spark. And there are many that are starting to join the fray here. And we don't always have to look into those particular platforms to fulfill print orders. In fact, there are many offset printers that are perfectly capable, and especially if you are running something like, say, a Kickstarter campaign where you're getting the funding ahead of time to get those print runs fulfilled. So with that being said, you're probably wondering what are the options that are out there. And one of the options that I've actually known of for the past few years is through a place called Puffer Print. And I met Jeremy Epstein, about a few years ago. You'll even hear inside this interview with Jeremy where we talk about, like, when did we get connected? Was it prior to the pandemic? It's just become so hazy at this point. But why don't we have a conversation about offset printing and how this might work out for your author brand? Is it for everybody in every walk of life? Probably not. Some newbie authors, maybe it's not appropriate, especially if you don't have an already built-in following. So without any further ado, let's get into this interview about offset printing with Jeremy Epstein of Puffer Print. Jeremy, when was the last time we actually talked? Was that pre-pandemic or was that post-pandemic?
All of our memories are a little scrambled around that time frame.
Yeah,
I think
really.
we might have been somewhere amidst the pandemic at that point. I think I found you on YouTube. I said, I got to meet this guy. We reached out. We had a nice chat, and we've been in touch more or less since.
Yeah, it's really cool to see that you're still, kicking away at it and such. So why don't we just back it up just a little bit? What got you into the business of offset printing? Because obviously Puffer Print, you've been around for a while and you've built quite a reputation in this space.
Yeah. Thanks, Dale. So the journey really began, I guess, 2018 or 19. A very good friend of mine from college was in touch, and he said, "Hey, I've been working on this book. I want to get it printed." I said, "Cool. Well, how do you do that?" He said, "I have no idea." So we just kind of did some searching together, and okay, well, how do you find a printer? Here's some options. They all seem pretty expensive, and ultimately we made a pathway by doing, fulfilling his need, right? So we sort of scratched our own itch here, and he sort of enlisted me to help. We found a really good printer overseas, and we teamed up with them, really liked the experience. And after going through this with his first book and then his second book, the entrepreneur in me said, "Hey," his name was Matt. "Hey, Matt, can we just do this for others? I mean, we can sort of automate a few of these things and do some outreach. I'm sure that if this is helpful for you, it's going to be helpful for other people out there." Little did I know that was kind of like the beginning of a whole journey to become Puffer Print. So we did this on a really limited basis, reaching out to some Kickstarter campaign projects. It's where a lot of self-published authors tend to fund their books. And ultimately, we found that there was quite a bit of demand. So it sort of took off from there. Matt ended up stepping away from the business, and I've taken it and run with it for the last 4 years or so. And I think with the offset aspect of it, it definitely speaks to a certain portion of the self-published authors out there. I will be the first to tell you, offset printing isn't necessarily the right solution for everybody. We do offer digital printing as well, but print on demand could be a sort of the other sort of unspoken option here. That can be a great option for some authors, but for the right customer doing the right type of book where print production, quality, the saturation and sort of color rendering of the images really matter, offset printing still is the best way to go. And we aim to make access to that super easy, and that journey of, hey, I want to write a book, to, hey, I've got a stack of beautiful books that got delivered to me or to my fulfillment partner. We want to make that journey as simple and frictionless as possible.
This is really cool. You've always been fully transparent. It's really neat that you automatically say, hey, look, we're not for everybody. And I've noticed that transparency in some of your pieces that you write over on your blog, which is fantastic. I think everybody should subscribe to your email newsletter so they can get notifications on those type of things. So what are, who is the ideal person that would be using offset printing? Who's that author? What do they look like?
They look like everybody. What I've learned is that I think I can't remember the stat. It was around 1% to 2% of people actually end up writing a book in their lifetime, which is shocking. That's a pretty big market. And I would say almost 50% of people sort of want to write a book in their lifetime. So there's maybe something to come back to is how do you go from wanting to write a book to writing a book? But then, there's this Pandora's box that opens up as soon as you say, okay, I'm gonna do the thing. I'm gonna write the book. Okay, well, it turns out writing the book itself is only like the first step in the journey. Then you've got all of these things ahead of you, which is who do you print with, how do you print, and then marketing, etc. So that how do you print part, that's where we come in, right? And we can give you the options of digital printing, of offset printing, depends on the type of book. But what we tend to find is that for offset printing, because you pay a little more for a higher quality of image, we work probably 90% of what we produce is children's books, followed by art books. So these are all books where the images matter, right? The quality and rendering of those colors matter. And so we end up doing children's books that are, of all different shapes and sizes, from board books, quite a lot of board books, to your typical hardcover, and all manner of softcover, wire bound, everything in between. But really, that is our sweet spot, is the offset printing.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for authors when they're first approaching offset printing? Because I know you probably run into some issues on a customer side of things where maybe someone came in with some unrealistic expectations, or maybe they weren't fully prepared for it.
Yeah. So I'll say there's probably two aspects to this. One is file preparation and just ensuring that your files are properly formatted and ready to go. We found that this is often a barrier. Like, personally, I'm not savvy with file formatting myself. So we've hired a number of people on our side to say, hey, look, if a customer has images that they've produced, they want to get them ready for print, we can help you do that. For people who are relatively savvy with that type of stuff, it's typically no problem, as long as they kind of go through the process as we describe it. So the file prep can be a pretty simply surmountable barrier, right? Like, we have the tools. Just tell us where you are, and we'll bring the tools to you, whether that's bringing an editor in or a formatter. We have all of that sort of on staff and ready to go. I would say the second part with offset printing, and this is really important to recognize, is when you are doing offset printing, you are ordering books in bulk. And the more books you order, the lower your price per book is going to be. So maybe 250 books, just a random example, might be, let's call it $6 per book, whereas 1,000 copies of that same book is going to be more like $3.50 a book, right? So your margin per book sale increases the more you order. But there's a risk, right? Now you have this, what I call an inventory risk. If you're ordering lots of books, hoping to make, let's call it $15 per book as opposed to $9 per book, you have to now figure out how to become a marketer and a seller of those books. And that, I think, becomes sometimes a barrier to people sort of figuring out the right economics of how many books should they order. And also, there's a lot of work to be done on the back end. That's actually something that Puffer Print's really focusing on now, is actually providing more tools and education on helping self-published authors actually sell their books. Obviously, it serves us. The more you sell your books, the sooner you're going to come back and print more of them with us. So it's good for us, but obviously we want our authors to be successful and to be able to look at the economics of this. I mean, there's definitely a business end to writing a book, which is, okay, if I spend X number of dollars to print X number of books, what's my return on investment? What's my margin per book? What's my break-even point? How many books do I need to sell to break even? And then how much profit can I make on top of that? And those economics improve the more you print, the more books you print. But of course, that means more books you have to sell. So there's a lot of technique, a lot of nuance to that. But if you come to the website, there's a lot of good information on guiding you through how to sell books in person, how to work with your local book stores. Dale, I'm sure you've got some good content on this as well. So there's a lot to learn, but I think there's a lot of help out there as well.
You had mentioned one of the challenges being having the files properly formatted. Let's just say, for instance, and I know that a lot of authors will say this, like, if I can save a few bucks that I can put towards the bulk order, I will do that. So they would probably rather get the files formatted themselves, so that way it's less of an expense. So what would you recommend? How should they format things? Is there a particular software that they use or a resource that you could get them to lean into?
Yeah. So if they're trying to do it themselves, I would say Canva can actually be a pretty effective, and they've created some of the best tools out there in my book for people who don't know. Like, I can use Canva. So that tells me something, that it's pretty good for people who are not savvy and have never sort of taken the time to learn how to format the files. Otherwise, your typical Adobe programs will have, that's probably what the majority of our authors use who are familiar with those types of programs. But again, there is a learning curve to those things, right? So the other option being, you can come to us, we'll set you up with our formatting people, or you can go to a platform like Upwork or Fiverr. There's plenty of people there. And you could essentially just download the file formatting requirements from our website, give them to your contractor there, and they can likely get it done for you. So there's a lot of options. It doesn't have to be crazy brain damage. And there's always that, you have to think about how much time do you want to spend versus what's the value of your time, and maybe sometimes it's worth just paying someone. What we find is people are typically surprised at it doesn't cost that much to hire someone to get the work done for you, and that can save weeks in many cases.
Nice. You kind of said exactly what I was thinking, but I wanted to see how you would express it, and this was very interesting. Let's back up just a little bit. You mentioned a very unique product that you don't see very often anywhere else, and that's board books. What are some other unique products that you have part of Puffer Print that maybe people could probably explore for their publishing brand?
Yeah. So what we found is that with our printing partner, and we work exclusively with one printing house overseas, although I guess exclusively is not the right word, because we do have some other options. We actually recently onboarded someone in the US for those who are looking for US based printing. But generally what we found is that they're able to do almost anything that the mind can conceive. So we have had some really interesting projects come up with all sorts of things that I didn't anticipate authors coming to us with, but we've been able to do them. So for instance, we've done some really cool slip cases with embossing or debossing on them that are, we had one recently that had 12 books embedded within the case. So that was super cool.
Nice.
We're able to do all sorts of packaging, and actually we've had a few projects where there's been a toy or like a plushie that has gone along with the book, like one of the characters from the book. We're able to actually produce those things, package them up, and send them out. So that's unique. That's something that we've been doing more recently. But really there's almost anything that you can think of where we're open to at least exploring whether we can make it happen. And in most cases, I find we're able to do it. I actually brought a couple books along. So things like we've got There's a
Oh, we get the ribbon bookmark on there. Nice.
ribbon bookmarks. There's I don't know if it's going to pick it up, but there's some embossing here. So all of these little options totally on the table with us.
Very interesting. This is really cool to see. Now, when somebody orders, let's say a bulk order from you, do you handle fulfillment as far as distributing it to customers, or do you just give that over to the author and say, okay, it's all yours, have fun?
We can do either. I try not to tell them to have fun because it doesn't sound that fun. I'm a very transparent guy. So if a customer says, hey, well, why don't I just get these all sent to me and I can save some money? I said, all right, well, let's just think this through. Just so you know what you're getting into, that you're going to have to hold on to these books. They're going to take up some space. If you're ordering even our minimum 250 books, that's going to be a number of boxes. So you've got to store them, and storing them in your garage, not always the best idea. You want to keep them in sort of a temperature controlled environment. Then if you're trying to sell these one by one, say through a website or a crowdfunding campaign, just try to go through printing a label, packaging a book, taping that label on, and then getting it into the hands of a mail carrier just once, and then multiply that by how many books you want to sell. And that people are like, oh, actually, yeah, that's, on top of everything else I do in my life, that may not be a good option. So to answer your question, people are welcome to and often do self-fulfill, and I'm proud of them for taking that on. For me in my life, I just couldn't add the extra time. So we do have a fulfillment partner. We don't do the fulfillment directly through Puffer Print, but again, sort of a longtime trusted partner called Straight Up Shipping, also located about 20 minutes from my office here in the Denver area of Colorado. And we love them. They do great work. They can work with, again, crowdfunding, online orders. Essentially, you can connect your order system with them and they just make it happen. So that's another thing to think about when you're talking sort of economics of book sales. Whether you want to self-fulfill, and that self-fulfillment might make sense for your first order and minimum order and see how sales go. But as you ramp up, if that's your goal as a self-published author, I think fulfillment becomes almost a necessity.
Nice. So with the whole fulfillment end of things, I'm really kind of thinking about this because Lord knows I wouldn't want to have a big bulk of boxes here. Obviously, this is probably not coming free. Is there a significant upcharge for something like this? And do we have to anticipate like maintenance fees? So for instance, like storage and things like that?
Yeah, that's all part of it, right? So,
Okay.
When we connect you with Straight Up Shipping, they'll try to understand your order, obviously the number of orders and where you anticipate those going, whether they're going to be domestic, some overseas. And then, they'll give you a price breakdown. But within that price breakdown, I think we typically are seeing a regular storage fee, and that's minimal, but it's there, as well as the postage, and then I think the main fee to look for is just the per order handling fee. So how much are they charging to take that book, put it in a box, put the label on it, and get it into the hands of a mail carrier. And that's typically a flat fee that wouldn't change no matter where the book's being sent, and typically wouldn't change based on the book size. Obviously, there's postage on top of that, but you're going to be paying the postage no matter if you're self-fulfilling or someone else is doing it for you.
But you're not having to worry about handling the postage, much less like the packing materials and putting all that stuff together, like getting tape and getting boxes and getting labels. So I hand this off to this other party. They manage it all for me, and I don't have to worry about any of that stuff.
That's right. Yep. So for years, I did all the fulfillment of our samples for Puffer Print, and so
Wow.
when I'm talking about this, I'm speaking from experience that I've done. I've gone through many rolls of packing tape over here, and at this point, I'm not doing that anymore. We do handle it in-house, but our customer service rep, Heather, typically handles that now. So, but once you reach a certain volume, it really just becomes it makes more sense to go through the fulfillment option.
Nice. Jeremy, we've blasted through time like it's nobody's business, and Lord knows I've got 50,000 questions that could keep us here for the next 2 hours. But let's go ahead and start to wrap up today's podcast. And I want to ask you the question I ask everybody else. What advice do you have for aspiring authors and self-publishers out there?
Yeah, I love this question. As an entrepreneur, I will give the same advice that I give to entrepreneurs, which is just start. And it's two simple words. Just put pen to paper or open up your computer and just start, because I think a lot of people can spend years in the idea phase. Things evolve so much faster when you actually begin to codify them onto paper with ink. And that's when you've started writing a book. So again, everybody, the stats are like 50% of people want to write a book, 1% to 2% actually get to the point of having written a book. But that first step to go from sort of a wannabe to an actual author that begins with just take 10 minutes. Just take 10 minutes out of your day, get a pad of paper out, and just start jotting down your ideas or writing a sentence. Doesn't even have to be the first sentence of the book, can be the last one or something that just sounds cool in your head, but just start. That's my advice, and I think a lot can come from that.